The gate was iron. Black iron, custom forged, with a monogram welded into the center. A looping V for Vanthorpe. I had chosen that monogram myself, 11 years ago, standing in a muddy field while a contractor held up samples. I remember the weight of the iron bar in my hand. The gate cost $4,000. The house behind it cost $12 million. I was standing in the driveway when the realtor called to confirm the wire transfer had cleared. And I was still standing there, wearing a linen blazer in 40-degree heat, when the black Range Rover came screaming up the private road, and my husband pressed his face against the bars like an animal who had just realized the cage door swings both ways. Welcome to Calm Revenge Tales. I'm going to tell you a story about a gate, a grandmother, a marriage certificate, and what happens when a man mistakes his wife's silence for weakness. If that sounds like something you need to hear, subscribe. I promise you, justice finds its way here. Every time. My name is Celestine Vanthorpe. I am a licensed structural engineer. I spent 15 years designing load-bearing systems for high-rise towers before I transitioned into property development, which is at its core the same discipline. You find the weak points. You reinforce them. You build something that outlasts everyone who doubted it. I built the Whitmore Road estate from a single parceled lot I bought at auction for $800,000 when I was 31. I did the structural drawings myself on my kitchen table. I managed 4 different contractors, fought a rezoning battle for 18 months, and moved into the completed house on my own, with a bottle of sparkling water because I don't drink, and a list of what still needed fixing. Kofi came into my life 2 years after I moved in. He was charming. He laughed easily. He was the kind of man who remembered your coffee order after one meeting and made you feel like the room got warmer when you walked in. I believed in him completely. That is not a confession of stupidity. It is a record of what was true at the time. What was also true. His grandmother, Moily, lived in a granny flat on the family compound in Tima. She was 74 years old, sharp as a blade, and treated by the rest of the family like furniture they had to store but didn't want. She spoke 4 languages. She made a groundnut stew that I still think about in the middle of the night. And the first time I met her, when Kofi took me to Ghana 18 months into our relationship, she looked at my hands, not my face, my hands, and said, "You build things. I can see it." I said, "I try to build things that stay standing." She nodded. She didn't smile. She just nodded slowly, as if I had confirmed something she already suspected. The family treated her like she was invisible. They talked over her at dinner. Her eldest son, Kofi's uncle Prentice, referred to her room as the annex. They asked her to cook, and they ate without thanking her, and they never asked what she needed. I noticed. I always noticed the load distribution in a room. The formal invitation came 18 months after Kofi and I married, stamped and printed on cream card stock. The Vanthorpe family reunion and naming ceremony, Accra, Ghana. Kofi's cousin Adenek was naming her new son. 3 days of events. The entire extended family. The note at the bottom, handwritten by Prentice's wife Theodora, said, "Please understand, Celestine, that the program is in Chui and you. We wouldn't want you to feel left out. Perhaps you might prefer to arrive only for the Saturday dinner." What they meant. Come for the performance, not the substance. Dress well. Don't speak. Kofi didn't mention the note. He handed me the envelope and watched my face with that particular stillness he had when he was waiting to see which way I would break. I didn't break. I booked my own flights, arrived on Thursday as scheduled, and spent the first morning in the kitchen with Moily, who was making fanty for the Friday lunch. She handed me a wooden spoon without being asked. "You've been here before," she said. It wasn't a question. "In this kitchen?" "No." She stirred her pot. "In this position. Standing where nobody wants you, doing what needs doing anyway." I said nothing. I diced the onions the way she showed me. My eyes watered in the heat. That Friday at the lunch, Theodora introduced me to 3 different relatives as Kofi's friend from London. Not his wife. His friend. Kofi, standing 4 feet away with a glass of Sabalo in his hand, did not correct her. I watched his jaw move. I watched him make the calculation. And I watched him say nothing. I filed that in the same part of my brain where I file structural defects. A hairline fracture. The kind you can walk past 100 times without noticing, until the load shifts. The naming ceremony was Saturday afternoon, outdoors, under a white canopy in the courtyard. Moily sat in the second row because Theodora had quietly moved her chair when she wasn't looking. I moved it back. Theodora saw me do it. She smiled the smile of a woman composing her counter-move. Halfway through the ceremony, Theodora leaned across 2 seats and told Moily, in a clear, carrying voice, that the old woman's singing was distracting, and that perhaps she should wait inside. Moily went still. Not frightened. Still, the way a very old tree goes still in wind, because it has survived enough wind to know what survives and what doesn't. I said, "She's not singing. She's responding. That's how it's done. She's been doing it for 70 years. Theodora turned to look at me. I said, "And this is her family's ceremony, not yours." The man beside me, Kofi's cousin Ephraim, who I had liked, he opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked at the floor. Kofi said nothing. Theodora stood up and walked to the edge of the canopy and spoke to Prentice in low, controlled Chui. Prentice walked over. He asked Moily, very politely, very publicly, if she was feeling well and perhaps would like to rest inside. She understood exactly what he was doing. She stood up. She smoothed her dress with both hands. The way a woman smooths a dress when she wants to show she is not hurrying. She is choosing. She looked at me. She said, "Don't apologize on my behalf. Not ever." I stood up and followed her inside. It wasn't exile. It was a door. And I chose to walk through it. We flew home on Monday. Kofi and I did not fight. We never fought, we circled. He told me I had embarrassed him. I told him I had returned to find my own seat. The conversation ended there. The way conversations end when one person stops being interested in the outcome and starts being interested in the evidence. I moved Moily to the Whitmore Road estate 3 months later. She needed a ground floor room and someone to help with her medications. And I hired a live-in carer named Bernice who had a 20-year background in geriatric nursing and a habit of arriving to work with exactly the right pastry from the Ghanaian bakery on Cold Harbor Lane. It cost me £4,200 per month. I restructured one of my smaller development projects to cover it. I did not ask Kofi to contribute. He did not offer. Moily arrived with 1 suitcase and a wooden recipe box, painted green, with a brass latch. She kept it on the kitchen counter. She never opened it in front of anyone else. I noticed it when she moved in, and again 3 weeks later when she was making Contamire stew and I sat at the counter to watch. And again the following spring when I came home late from a site meeting, and found her sitting at the kitchen table with the box open, reading something inside. She closed it when she heard me. She smiled. She said, "Tea." I said, "Always." I didn't ask about the box. Some loads are not mine to carry. Kofi began spending Wednesday nights in London, then extended weekends. He said it was a new contract in Canary Wharf. I said nothing. I was drawing structural plans for a mixed-use development in East Croydon, and I had 3 contractor disputes running simultaneously, and Moily had started teaching me to make light soup on Sunday mornings, and the kitchen filled with steam and ginger, and the sound of her humming something I didn't recognize but liked. Prentice called in October to ask if I would consider relocating Mama to a facility. I asked which facility he meant. He named a place in Tottenham that I had driven past and evaluated, involuntarily, the way engineers always evaluate structures: foundation settling, roofline sagging. I told him Moily was comfortable where she was. Theodora emailed in December with a link to a care home in Accra and the message: "We feel she would be more at home surrounded by her culture." I archived the email. I did not respond. The green box sat on the counter through it all. Small, patient, brass-latched. Present. If you're watching this and you're in the middle of your own quiet storm, subscribe so the rest of this story finds you. The green box is about to explain itself. And when it does, nothing is the same. Moily died in February on a Thursday morning. in her ground floor room with the window open to the garden. Bernice was with her. She had made me a list the week before, on paper in careful handwriting, of things she wanted me to know. One of them was a recipe for a gushy stew, written with specific weights and temperatures. One of them was the name of a solicitor in Accra, a Mr. Ansakumi of Ansakumi and Partners. The third thing on the list was, "The box is yours now." Everything in it always was. I put the list in my jacket pocket. I wore that jacket to the solicitor's office 6 weeks later, after Mr. Ansakumi's assistant called me, not Kofi me, to schedule a reading of Moily Vanthorpelade's estate documents. I didn't know she had an estate. I thought she had a suitcase and a recipe box. I brought the green box to the meeting. I don't know why. I just knew it belonged in the room. Mr. Ansakumi's London associate held the reading in a conference room in Gray's Inn. Kofi was there, which surprised me. Prentice was there, and Theodora, and 2 of Kofi's aunts I had met once. They were expecting paperwork, formalities, the administrative conclusion of an old woman's small life. The green box sat on the table in front of me. Theodora looked at it the way people look at a thing they should recognize but don't. Mr. Ansakumi opened his folder. Moily Abina Vanthorpelade had, over 37 years, quietly inherited, consolidated, and managed a portfolio of land parcels in the Greater Accra region totaling 17 distinct plots, with a combined assessed value of $4,800,000. Her late husband, Kofi's grandfather, a man named Yah who had died before I met any of them, had registered everything in her name, alone, because, the solicitor read aloud, Yah Vanthorpelade stated in his own hand that his wife was the only person in the family with the discipline and judgment to be trusted with anything permanent. Nobody moved. The 2 aunts looked at each other. Prentice said, "This is," he stopped. Kofi's hands went flat on the table. Theodora pressed one hand to her mouth. It was the performance of grief, but behind it, in her eyes, was something I recognized as the specific shame of a woman who has been comprehensively proven wrong in front of witnesses. The solicitor continued. The estate was to be divided in a manner specified by Moily's own addendum, signed 2 years ago, witnessed by Mr. Ansakumi and one Bernice Oforaway, my Bernice, who had apparently accompanied Moily to the Accra office on a trip I thought was a holiday visit. To the family, the proceeds of 3 parcels liquidated, split equally. To the family compound to be maintained in perpetuity, 2 parcels. To Celestine Vanthorpelade by name. The remaining 12 parcels, in full, in recognition of, and here the solicitor paused, and I understood that Moily had written this herself, because no solicitor writes this way. The only person who moved my chair back and stayed in the room. Prentice stood up. He said several things. The solicitor waited. I opened the green box. Inside, under the recipes, the agushi, the light soup, the kontomire, was the original land registry documentation. And underneath that a single sheet of paper. A marriage certificate. Dated 4 months ago. Kofi Vanthorpelade and a woman named Adenek Mensaprat. Adenek. Kofi's cousin who had named her baby at the ceremony where Moily had been asked to wait inside. I set the certificate on the table. I said quietly, "You moved her chair." Kofi looked at the certificate. He did not look at me. I said, "She told me. Don't apologize on my behalf. Not ever. I'm not going to." My solicitor filed for annulment on grounds of bigamy within the week. Kofi's legal team offered a settlement. Half the value of the Whitmore Road estate, in exchange for silence on the marriage certificate and a non-disclosure agreement. I instructed my solicitor to decline. What Kofi had relied on for 12 years was my name on the property deeds. The Whitmore Road estate was mine. The structural surveys were in my name. The planning permissions, the development agreements, the insurance policies, all mine. He had signed nothing, owned nothing, contributed nothing beyond his presence and his charm. I listed the Whitmore Road estate at $12.4 million. It sold in 6 weeks. Full asking price. Cash buyer. I made one phone call to Kofi before the sale completed. I told him what I was doing. I told him that if he wanted to dispute it, he was welcome to, and that I would see him in court, where the bigamy certificate would become part of the public record. There was a long silence. I told him, "I don't enjoy this, but I notice you didn't stop it when there was still time." He said nothing. I hung up. He arrived at the gate 3 days after the sale completed. The new owners, a retired architect and her husband, had already changed the code. He pressed his face between the iron bars of the monogrammed gate.